Heroes first, veterans together, legacy forever. I want to thank you for joining me on this journey of getting to know our heroes on a much deeper level. I am your host, Josh White, and this is the Hero Front Podcast. Let's get after it. What is up, everyone? Josh White here. Thank you so much for joining us today on this very special episode, talking to my good friend, Victoria Baldwin. This will be the first two-part series that Hero Front has done, but there are two very different dynamics of this story. So Victoria Baldwin is a mother, master resiliency trainer, writer, photographer, and active duty tech sergeant out of Travis Air Force Base, California. Now, after suffering the devastating loss of her brother to domestic violence, Sergeant Baldwin fell back on the skills that she learned in her resiliency training and rebuilt her life and that of her sisters, becoming a licensed foster parent and eventually adopting two of her siblings. She and her sisters have since created a nonprofit endeavor to honor their brother while simultaneously writing and speaking about what they have learned from their loss and what they wish others knew when it comes to helping those navigate through grief. In the first episode of this two-part series, Victoria runs us through the story of her brother tragically being killed at the hands of her father, who was dealing with a mental illness, and how it changed her and her family's life forever. And then going into part two, Victoria tells us all about adopting her two younger sisters and what that meant for them rebuilding their life together as this new family. It's a very inspirational story, and Victoria is one incredible airman and kick-ass woman, and I'm very proud of her for being transparent with her journey so that others may be inspired. Let's get after it. All right, so we're going to start with the first three. All right, so first question, what is a quote that you live by?
Oh, man. Gosh, I actually have a lot. I'm a big fan of quotes. Something I feel like if you have something, a quote that you can either say to yourself, or maybe you have like a sign in your room, kind of like your Hero Front one there. Those visual cues can remind you of like where your power might lie, or just remind you or reinvigorate you to keep moving forward. And so I'm tattooed, quite heavily tattooed. And I have one right here that says, "Live a life worth saving." And the story behind that is I had a tumultuous upbringing and I moved around a lot, and I didn't really have like a safe place to call my own. And my old neighbors, like literally no relation to me, they lived across the street from my grandparents and had known me since I was a kid. But when I was 16 and I ended up having no place to go, I was living with my uncle at the time. They reached out to my uncle and they said, you know, if Victoria wants to stay here so she can finish high school in the same town that she started it in, you know, we've got an extra room, like she's welcome to stay here. And so I ended up moving in with them. And they became my guardians for my last 2 years of high school. And, you know, you've probably heard before, kids grow up in a tumultuous upbringing. They might act out, skip school, hang out with the wrong crowd. That's what I was doing. And one night I ended up getting caught when I had snuck out of the house. And so David was the guy, and Connie was the woman. And so Connie and Dave, and they called me and said, you know, you can come home. And I had a little flip cell phone at the time. And I remember walking home and I was thinking like, oh, here it comes. Like, you know, all the same things I've kind of heard my whole life. You know, I'm a screw up, or I'm not worth anything, or whatever. You know, I was kind of preparing myself for that. And when I got home, Dave was just kind of like burly guy, about 5'10", you know, pretty stocky and tough. And he was crying, I remember. And I walked up and I was kind of surprised. And he said, "You have so much potential and you're throwing it all away." And I don't know why. And I just remember something about that moment where I was thinking, someone gives a damn. Someone cares. And I told him later when I was an adult, after I joined the military and kind of started a life of my own, I told him about that night and about how it changed my life and about how I realized that they saved my life because it redirected my path. And I started, going back to school. I pulled my GPA up. I got 2 jobs to finish out my senior year, enlisted in the Air Force, corrected the path that I was on. And I summarize it by saying, when I was 16, they saved my life. And so I decided to live a life worth saving. And so that's kind of just been my motto, that when life has taken me on some crazy paths, to just remember to live a life worth saving.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's a great answer. That's probably the best answer for that question that I've heard yet.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Second question is, to be a leader in the Air Force or just in the civilian world, just when people are, when you're responsible to a larger group of people, what book do you think is mandatory or should be mandatory reading for that individual in that position?
Oh, that's a really tough one. I think the title, is Start With Why. I feel like Simon Sinek. I have it on the physical book and then also an audiobook. And you could also catch some clips on YouTube that will summarize it in a shorter version. But starting with why, figuring out your why and what motivates you and what drives you, I think helps to find your purpose and helps you to lead other people with a sense of purpose. And when people understand their why, then they know where they're going and they know what drives them and motivates them. And so I think they're more committed and a better team player, and it helps the dynamics and camaraderie. So I would say start with why. Yeah.
I love Start With Why. And I got to have breakfast with Simon Sinek, and great guy.
I'm jealous.
Yeah. Awesome dude. And I did get a picture selfie with him and got a signed copy of his book, the whole 9 yards.
Wow. Rub that in my face.
Yep. I hope you like that. Take that, world. But I think purpose is underrated, I would say, because like when I look back at the happiest times of my life, it's when I had a clear path of purpose, and in the Air Force, we kind of fight for purpose. Like we joined for purpose. And so we're always wanting to feel purposeful, like we're on something big, like we have this mission, and I struggle when I don't have it or I don't see it. And so I'm trying to find different creative ways to find it, even when I feel like I don't have it. But special duties are full of purpose, in my opinion, like full of it.
Yeah. The closest I've gotten was I was FTAC NCOIC. So I know it's kind of different at every installation. Some people call it FTAC lead, some people call it FTAC NCO. When I was in Alaska, I got asked to do the job. I initially hadn't applied for it, and they had some applicants. They didn't think they were a right fit. And so they asked by name for me to consider doing that job. And initially it didn't work out, but they came back, they said, not this time. The manning, like you said, wasn't there. And they said, in 6 months, we're going to come back and ask again. So just so you know, you're who we think would be a great fit for this job. And so 6 months later, I interviewed this time, and my leadership had my back and supported me, and I got the job. And so I did that it's normally a 6-month gig in Alaska, but I was doing really well at it. And I was not just doing FTAC NCOIC things. I had arranged for a distinguished visitor to come to JBEAR where I was stationed. We'd done some NCO professional development courses, got involved in the community. So I was doing more than just FTAC. And so they asked if I could stay another 6 months, and my leadership let me do it. So I got to do it for a year. And that was really something. It happened the year after I lost my brother. And so we'll talk about that more later, but that was really something that helped to bring me back to life. That's the only way I can describe it. It really helped me to rediscover that purpose that I had lost when I lost my brother in the way that I did. And so it really, I summarize it by saying it brought me back to life, and it helped to get me on the road to recovery and redemption.
So yeah, you exactly what I was, getting at. You
You
nailed
hit
it.
it right on the head. Yeah,
You made it your own.
I
You were
agree.
proud of it. You were full of gratitude, and the more you gave to other people and showcased them and helped them, the more it healed you.
Yep.
So I think that's beautiful. Okay, last question before we start. What is your proudest Air Force moment?
Oh man. Um, One of my former airmen, who's gone on to become my best friend, actually. Her name is Katie Catherine Hernandez. She's one of the most talented airmen that I've ever met, and one of the smartest people I've ever met. And she inspires and motivates me. I met her when she was an airman, an A1C, and she's now a staff sergeant. And when she went to ALS, I just remember telling her, like, you're gonna win the Levitot. Like, she's exemplary in everything that she does. And so my proudest moment was actually seeing her husband FaceTime me during their graduation, and she did win. She won Levitot, and it was just really great to see someone so deserving, someone who is very talented, committed, kind, compassionate, professional, intelligent, someone who I want to be more like. And just, it was really great to just see her be recognized for all that she is, and the potential that she has. And so that was my proudest moment, was just, I don't know, I'd been there since the beginning and like watched her grow and felt motivated and inspired by who she is, and regardless of the rank difference. And so, yeah, it was just really great to see her do that.
That's awesome. That's like your little mini me.
Well, if there was anyone I could be more like, it would be her.
My Padawan also
Padawan.
won the Levitot.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's really great to see someone that, I think sometimes people think, oh, when you have a mentor or a leader, like, people attach ranks to those. And I would say she's my mentor, because she teaches me, like, every day something new, I swear, like, whether it's just about professionalism and how to carry yourself, or just the standards that she holds herself to. And it's just like, wow, like, I want to be more like you. So it's really
I love
great.
it when, like, someone, lower ranking or younger than you, like, blows your mind like that. That's like the best.
Yeah,
You're
it's
just
very
like,
humbling.
you're
Yeah.
like, man, you got it. Like,
Yeah.
you figured
Going
it out
places.
that early. Like, holy cow.
Yeah.
And yeah, I work with a guy right now named Staff Sergeant Tucker Wilder. He's a bioenvironmental engineer, and I have him in the COVID section. And this kid is so insanely smart and talented. He can figure out anything. Like, if they're like, oh, we need this number quantified and we need it broken out like this and this, dude can make it in like 5 minutes. Like, this whole complicated Excel equation. He's unbelievably talented. And I'm like, does anyone know you're this good, or is it just me? Like, so we held on to him for a long time, but unfortunately his last day is tomorrow. So we're super sad about it. So now we're going to roll right into our conversation here. So I've read this 3 times right here. Your article. I've read your article 3 times because it's a very powerful story, and I kind of pick up something different each time I read it, And so what we're going to talk about today, and today is a special day because it's your brother's birthday, February 24th, 2012. Gabriel James Baldwin, your little brother, was born. And so I didn't even piece that together until I read it for the 3rd time. And I'm looking at the dates, and I'm like, looking at my watch, and I'm like, holy cow, like, today is his birthday. And he would have been 10 today.
Yeah.
So what do you do on his birthday? You said you took off today.
Yeah, I did. So there's a couple days throughout the year that are always really tough. So his birthday, February 24th, and then also April 4th through April 6th is always a hard time for my family, along with like milestones, Christmas and other birthdays, summer vacation, like little moments like that where you kind of feel like a twinge of pain. But yeah, February 24th. Yeah, it's a tough day. So I took the day off work. The kids and I played hooky, so they didn't go to school either. And one thing that we do on our brother's birthday is pay for birthday cakes anonymously, is what we aim to do. So we try to match the number of birthday cakes to how old he would be. So this year we bought 10 birthday cakes, and it's in honor and celebration of our brother. It's a way for us to take something that's truly terrible, horrific, an absolute tragedy that happened to our family, and turn it into something beautiful and bring joy to other people. And so we spend the first couple weeks in February just kind of asking around, asking friends, do you have anyone that has a child who has a birthday this particular week? Share it with your friends, text your parents, like anybody. It doesn't matter. There's no prerequisite. We just are trying to find kids to buy birthday cakes for. And then we make arrangements with the parent, send them money. $45 is our cake budget. So $450 is what we spent this year on birthday cakes. And if they're generous enough to share photos back with us of their kid and the cake, then we get to share that on our social media platform and just celebrate Gabe and who he was. So that's what we did today. We went to some bakeries and shared our story a little bit and paid for some birthday cakes, and we ate some cupcakes and some cookies and some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and just remembered our brother Gabe.
That's beautiful. I love the idea of bringing joy to other children through birthday cakes, like on his birthday. Like that's beautiful. And
Spider-Man cake, yeah.
It was a Spider-Man cake. Yes. It was basically someone sharing the photo with you. And I was like, wow, I'm really surprised. Like I didn't know more about this because it's such a beautiful idea and concept, but I'm so glad I know you. And I'm definitely going to do everything I can to share his story and continue his legacy.
Thank you. That means a lot, really.
Of course, we're friends for life now. So in your article, I'm basing a lot of the questions off your article. You said my whole story from when I was a kid is built in resilience. So I thought you could kind of go over a little bit about who you are. So, we can get to know you and, your path into the military and what your career field is.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I preface all of this, anything that we talk about it. One, I want to I feel like we should have like a content warning, because some of the information can get a little heavy. And also just keep in mind, it's from my perspective, because there's a lot of different parties involved, whether it be my siblings, step parent, my father, etc. So just preface all of that with it's my personal opinion about my experience and what I've taken from it. But to answer your question about why I joined the Air Force, like I mentioned earlier, a tumultuous upbringing. I've got a big family, 7 sisters and a brother, moved around a lot, didn't really have a steady place to call my own. I didn't live with my parents after I was 12. I lived with my grandparents, and then I lived with the aforementioned neighbors, Connie and Dave. And so I grew up just I remember feeling like this isn't how it's supposed to be. It doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be chaos. It doesn't have to be abuse or neglect. And you don't have to live paycheck to paycheck and get your food from a food bank. And I understand that people's circumstances, they're going to take the help that they can get. But I just remember from a young age feeling like it doesn't have to be this way. And my mom worked as a civilian at the time 3rd LRS up in Alaska, in Anchorage. At the time, it wasn't a joint base, and so she would take us sometimes to work. Excuse me. She took us to work sometimes, and she worked in like the CSS, which is ironically where I work now. But she worked in the CSS at the 3rd LRS, and we would go on to Elmendorf and. I don't know. I was 15 years old, and her husband at the time said, "What are you going to do when you graduate high school?" And I said, "I'm going to join the Air Force." And then that just became my answer. And so initially, I think it was kind of a means to an end. It was a way to get out of the small town that I did live in. And it was vaguely familiar because of the time that my mom had worked in the commander support staff up there. And so that's what I did. And so I joined. At the time, they referred to it as open general. I think they call it like general aptitude now. But yeah, I went open general and I raised my right hand for 6 years. And that's almost 15 years ago now. So 2007 is when I enlisted. I've had the opportunity to, I think I'm on my 5th installation, deployed twice. I'm a health services manager by trade. And like I said, working in the commander support staff now here at Travis Air Force Base in California. And I mean, lots of cool experiences. It's a challenge to work in the CSS now because I actually did information systems for 6 years. So I was, kind of come from like a cyber background most recently. So it's been a learning curve, but it's always nice learning new things. A challenge. Who doesn't like that?
Definitely. So we're both in the medical career field.
Yeah.
That's crazy. We could be in the same hospital one day. You don't know.
Honestly, yeah, you don't know. You never know.
You got to come to Eglin. It's much warmer here, I promise.
My first installation was Tampa. So
okay.
McDill.
So you know.
I know. Sometimes I miss that Gulf Coast weather.
Definitely. We love it here. So thank you for sharing that. Great way to turn your life around, right? Like you kind of, you didn't know what your plan was. You just knew you needed to get out of there and you needed to start fresh and kind of pave your own path, right?
Yeah.
And that's like an easy way to do that. Hey, I'm joining the Air Force.
Yeah.
I was kind of in the same boat. My dad was in the Air Force, so that was definitely a huge factor. But at the same time, like I was kind of like, I felt like the town I was in was just, I was going nowhere. And so similarly, I wanted to go overseas. And so my first base was Guam, and I got to escape as well and kind of start my own thing, and thinking I was going to come back in 6 years. And yeah, here I am 17 years later.
Right.
Okay.
It goes by quick.
It does. So you go by Tori, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Because your name's Victoria Baldwin. And when you emailed me,
yeah.
I was like, say what? That's her name? I thought it was Tori.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Tori's a nickname. So yeah.
Okay. So Tori, we're going to go into, the main portion of our conversation here. So what we're talking about is when you sadly lost your little brother. You found out when you were in Alaska, I believe it said. And so you kind of had this helpless, shocking news. You were where was he physically located?
Indiana.
So he's in Indiana. You're in Alaska. Yep. You're pretty much in another country.
Might as well be.
And so you're feeling helpless. And it was a very, very traumatizing, scary event. And you've come a long way since then. It's quite the story. And I was hoping you could start with running us through that day that you got the phone call from your stepmother.
Yeah. So again, content warning. It was April 4th of 2017. And I was at work. I had talked to my stepmom that morning, actually, because I was in the process of renewing my security clearance. And so it's funny how little moments get kind of burned into your memory that are like irrelevant. My stepmom and we were never particularly close. I didn't really have like a problem with her. It was just, she was my stepmom, and, she came into my life when I was a little bit older, and I joined the Air Force and moved, pretty shortly after. So we talked, but not super often. She and I didn't talk, every day or anything like that. So I had talked to her that morning because I was filling out some information for my security clearance. And then a couple hours later, she called me back. And I remember thinking, well, that's kind of weird that she's calling me back. I just talked to her. And I was at work, and she said, I answered the phone, and she said, are you sitting down? And I, ever the smart ass, said, yeah, are you? And she said, Gabe is being life flighted to a hospital in Indianapolis. I don't know what happened. Your father's been arrested. And I said, what? In such a way that I remember my boss turned around in his chair to like look at me like in shock. What? Are you okay? And I got up and I left the room, and I kept saying, what do you mean? What do you mean? And she said, I don't know what happened. They called me at work. I'm on my way to the police station right now. I don't know. Your dad choked your brother, is what she said. And I had walked to a window in this hallway in the hospital at work, and I was trying to get better signal because in my mind I was like, I couldn't have heard this right. Let me get to somewhere where I can make sure my phone isn't, breaking up or something. The signal is not bad. And she said, I'll call you back when I know more. And my boss had followed me out of the room, and I was standing at this window, and I started crying and repeating what she had said. I just said, my dad choked my brother and he's been arrested. And I'm crying, and my boss is like, okay, let's go to the chaplain's office. Cause that's the first place he could think of that was somewhere kind of secluded, because I was in the middle of the hallway. So, he's trying to kind of usher me somewhere where he can talk to me and get more information, because I'm just crying. And we go to the chaplain's office, and I'm calling my stepmom back repeatedly. And information is kind of just coming through, in chunks. So she gets to the police station. She finds out that she can't talk to her father, or to my father, her husband. She is finding out that Gabe is, being life flighted to Indianapolis, to the children's hospital there. And so that's I think around a 2-hour drive from where she lived. So that, she's decides to drive to Indianapolis, understandably. I'm calling the hospital where he's supposed to be getting to. And I'm explaining, I'm his sister, and I'm in Alaska, and has he arrived? And I'm asking all these questions, and they update me. First he's not there, and then they confirm he is there, and they confirm that emergency services is being provided to him. They're trying to resuscitate him, and all these kinds of things. And my boss, meanwhile, is saying, we can get a Red Cross notification. You can leave tonight. And it's one of the things I look back on and wish I could have done differently. But at the time I was thinking, I need to pack a bag, and we don't know what's happening. And your mind is trying to convince you of all these things. But in the moment, that's what I was telling myself. Like, he might be okay. We don't know what's happening. Maybe he's okay. Maybe it was an accident. Just give it time. I don't want to rush to any conclusion. And I ended up leaving the next night. So in Alaska, everything that leaves is typically like a red-eye flight. So I left around like 11 o'clock the next night. That had given me time to get home, to pack a bag, submit leave, get flight arrangements, and kind of just take it as it comes. And so I left the next night, and it was a flight from Anchorage, Alaska to Chicago, and then from Chicago to Indianapolis. And Indianapolis is where my brother had been life flighted to. And so in that time that I'm packing and making arrangements and things like that, I'm talking to my stepmom, and they've confirmed, like, my dad has been arrested, and he is in the county jail. And it was intentional. My brother, they thought for a few hours, they thought he might be okay. They got him resuscitated. They put him on life support. They were checking for, brain activity, and it ended up being that he was initially showing signs of improvement. And so we were hopeful, like, he might live and just have some deficits. I say just, but he might live and have some deficits. But a few hours later, they determined that there was no brain function, and that without the assistance of machines, he would not survive. Unfortunately, they came to that decision while I was on that flight from Alaska to Chicago. And so I spent almost the entire flight crying, hoping, because at that time I didn't know what was going to happen, and I didn't know if he was going to be okay. And it's a long flight. It's like 6 hours or something like that. And so I was just pretty much weeping the whole time. And then I landed in Chicago the morning of April 6th, and opened my phone to a voicemail, and it was my stepmom's mother. And she just said, hey, Tori, it's Susan. Go ahead and give me a call when you get this. And I still have this voicemail saved. It's been almost 5 years and I still have that saved. And I knew based on that message alone, I knew that he had passed away. So they had made the decision while I was on that flight, which I respect. It was absolutely their decision, but they made the decision to withdraw life support, and he passed away shortly after.
So that when you say you regret that flight, you regret it because you didn't get, in your mind, you didn't get there quick enough.
Yeah, I regret not leaving sooner. Whether it's true or not, I tell myself that if I had left that night that I got the call instead of the next night, I would have made it in time to see him. Because Gabriel was the victim of a crime, the coroner and the police took possession of his body almost immediately after he passed away. So I didn't get to see him. I did not get to say goodbye to him. I didn't get to tell him how sorry I was. So it's been 5 years, and that is something that I still think about a lot. And I still tell myself, you have to remind yourself, I have this saying that feelings lie, and feelings will be good one day and not so good another day. And so you have to rely on what you know to be true. And I know that I did the best I could with the information I had at the time. Sometimes I don't feel that way. So I have to remember what I know.
No, absolutely. I think anyone who hears it like I heard it, you left very quickly. You did what any rational minded person would do, get your affairs in order and then go on the next flight, which is what you did. And it is tough. It's tough because, you didn't get to see them, before they made that choice. And I know how that feels, in a way. So I know exactly that feeling that you're talking about. Like, I should have done it this way. I shouldn't have been so naive to think that it was okay. Yeah, that's very tough. And then you had to get on this long flight, and like that's a
with
hard,
nothing but your thoughts. Yeah.
like
And
that's,
I'm sure everyone thought I was like out of my mind because I was just crying the whole time.
yeah, that's one of the hardest. That's one of the worst spots you could have that kind of news. And then you're stuck literally in this flying box up in the sky. You can't go anywhere. You can't talk. Like you know what I mean? All you can do is just cry in your hands and think about it for 6 hours. I mean, that's absolutely brutal.
Yeah, it was not fun. Not a good time.
And so one thing that's not in your article, that I was just curious about, like, well, it kind of is in your article. You talk about your dad. He's still your dad, right? And you saw everyone turn on him because of what happened. And there's this piece in the back of your mind that's like, I get it. I hate that this happened, but that's still my dad. Is anyone thinking about like they kind of took all the focus off your little brother and just all focus turned it into anger towards your dad. And I was wondering, like, if you could run me through how that played out. And then did you talk to him, after that? Like, when was the first time you talked to him after your brother passed away?
Yeah. So it's complicated because I know any adult has probably seen on the news, whether it be social media, on the television and the newspaper or whatever, you've seen an article about a parent or a caregiver who has badly injured or taken the life of a child. And you have a visceral reaction. And I think once you become a parent, that reaction becomes a lot more deeply rooted, and you find yourself just disgusted by that person. And you imagine, you read the information, and you're like, oh, like that's terrible. That person is, garbage. That person, like, they deserve to have that done to them. Because those are things that I remember thinking when I would see that kind of stuff on the news. I would think, like, what a terrible person. How could you do such a horrible thing? And you're disgusting. And I would have these thoughts in my head. And then my dad was that person. My dad was the person who took someone's life. And I was 28 years old, and I was seeing these news articles talking about this evil, describing him as evil and a monster. never commenting on the fact that he struggled with mental health his entire life, never commenting on the fact that he asked for help, that he quite literally asked to be committed, that he knew he was not okay and he wasn't being helped. And then he had a break with reality and did something to his ill mind at the time made sense. But they didn't talk about those things. And people shared their opinions I used to have when I would see those news articles. But it's different when you're reading it, when you're reading a stranger say that your dad deserves to be shot in the street, because that's what they would say. They would say, like, he should hang from the tree in whatever town square. He should stand before a firing squad. They would say these things. And when you find yourself on the other end of it and you're reading that stuff about your parent, you never expect to find yourself in that position. Nobody ever thinks about it. Nobody ever thinks it's going to happen to them. And so when you find yourself in that position where you know that this person is sick, and you know that this person has struggled their entire life, and you know that they weren't thinking as a rational, healthy human person would, and you still have love for them, but yet you're also devastated by what they've done and disgusted by what they've done, but you don't think that they should die for it. It really just changed my perspective. And I realized that I would say those things because I used to do that. I used to have that same opinion, and I would say those things, never thinking about the person who might be reading it on the other end, the 28-year-old daughter who may have been reading what I had to say about their loved one. And it doesn't make it any better. In no circumstance did what any Jack or Jane or Jill, who was from this same small town in Indianapolis or in Indiana, said, in no way did any of it make it any easier for us. It didn't make me feel any better. It wasn't comforting. It wasn't kind. It helped me not at all, not in the slightest. And so I did take the time actually to reach out to some of the people who posted those comments. And I said, this is my father, and I understand that you feel this way, but I just want to let you know that it doesn't make this any easier. I've lost my brother, and I've lost my father to jail at the time. He was arrested and he was in jail until he was sentenced a few years later. And to their credit, they were very kind, and they said, I didn't think about that. I didn't think you would ever see this. I didn't consider the fact that he had a family. I didn't consider the fact that people might see what I have to say. And so they would apologize. In every single instance, everyone was very kind and very receptive to me sharing my point of view. And I appreciate that a lot. But as far as talking to my dad, I've not heard his voice in 5 years. It's been almost 5 years. In April, it will be 5 years since he was arrested. So I do have a couple of voicemails from before everything happened, but otherwise, we initially talked over a handwritten letter. So he wrote a letter to me. I got it in August of 2017. So that was the first time that I heard from him when everything happened. He apologized. He continues to apologize. But yeah, we haven't spoke, over video chat or over phone or anything like that, but we have corresponded over letters and over emails, which is challenging in itself because sometimes I am very angry with him for what he's done. And we, of course, understandably have a complicated relationship. But we do talk occasionally.
Do you think you'll ever see him in person again or make that phone call? Or is that something that you're just going to say is not in your cards with him?
I don't know. He did try to call me one time, but I didn't know it. It was, you back in the day, I saw this like tweet the other day that said, when I first got my cell phone, we used to pay for ringtones. And then now if my phone makes a sound, I'm disgusted. And so it's funny because it would be like, caller ID and whatnot. And
We
so it
used
was
to
a
take
number I didn't
ringtones real
recognize.
serious, right?
Right. We used to pay 99 cents,
Yep.
$1.99 for a ringtone, and let my phone make a sound now. And it's just like, ugh. But he one time in the last 5 years had tried to call, and I didn't know it. I didn't recognize the number, so I let it go to voicemail. And then once it went to voicemail, it was like the automated system about accepting a phone call from the prison system. And so that was my chance to hear his voice. I don't know if I ever will. He is in prison in Indiana. He was sentenced in 2019 to 65 years in prison. So he will very likely never be a free man ever again, which again, I understand. But getting the phone call or the email, I think, from his lawyer that told us, what the verdict was, the 65 years, was another moment kind of burned into my brain. I didn't know how I was going to react, but I didn't react very well.
It's kind of
But
like
I
a
don't know if
sentence
I will.
for all of you too, right? Like you said, you lost more than your brother. You lost your brother and your
Yeah.
dad. And when
Yep.
you hear 65 years, it kind of makes it more real.
Yeah. I mean, because at that point, for me, I was hoping that they would take mercy on him because I knew he was sick. I knew that he'd struggled with mental health his whole life, but I also know that I'm far more compassionate than some people might be. And so there's just for 2.5 years, it was this limbo where we didn't know what was going to happen. He was in the county jail, initially it was awaiting a trial, and then they ended up offering him a plea deal, which was the 65 years. And so he took that plea deal because initially his charges would have resulted in a potential for a life sentence without the possibility of parole. And so the plea deal was 65 years with the possibility of parole. But given his age, it's very unlikely that he would ever, be a free man again. So, but that's exactly what it is we have lost not just our dad, but our brother as well. The girls too, we lost Gabe, but we lost our dad too. And everyone's dealing with it in their own ways. But
What's up, Hero Front fam? Josh here. And I just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to that episode in its entirety. I owe you a hug. And the next time I see you, let me know how many hugs I owe you and we'll get after it. Before you turn me off, though, I want you to subscribe on YouTube to the Hero Front Podcast and give me a 5-star rating on Facebook or Apple Podcasts. It would be much, much appreciated to get your love and support. Again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us on this Hero Front journey. And I will see you on the next episode. Let's get after it.